So with that, I'd like to go ahead and turn the call over to our Vice President of Servicer for Relationship Performance Management, Don Griffin. Don, take it away.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Servicer Information Session on COVID-19. This is actually our second session on this topic. We hope you find them informative as you service Freddie Mac loans and assist borrowers who require assistance. In today's session, the format is we're going to review some servicing policy updates and information, go through some questions and answers, open it up for questions and answers, and give you some information relative to some available resources on the website. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Ryan McGinnis from our Servicing Policy Group to get you up to speed on our latest bulletin. Ryan?
Thanks, Don, and thanks to everybody for joining us today. I'm going to walk you through at a high level what we've announced in previous bulletins, as well as how those announcements may be updated by our bulletin from this morning. So with that, I think we can move to the next slide and dive right in. Great. Okay. So as you see on the left here, this is Bulletin 2020-7, which was announced March 25th. This included several topics related specifically to our response to COVID-19. Much of this was more focused on reporting and inspection requirements, and with some other kind of more reminders for loss mitigation. So with Bulletin 2020-7, we did announce our repurposed EDR code. We are using our code 032, which had previously been in place for contaminated drywall and was a very little used code. So we were able to repurpose that to help us to identify COVID-19 impacts and when that has been the cause of the borrower's hardship. So we are requiring servicers effective April 1st, so immediately, to begin reporting the 032 code to us through our EDR system so that we can better identify these loans. And for any loan where there may have actually been contaminated drywall and you want to report that to us, we're instructing you to use the 011 property problem code. We also wanted to point out a couple other things. One, which we'll also kind of cover a little bit later on the commonly asked questions. We would not want to see the 034 disaster code reported in these cases. While we do understand there are similarities in how we are treating the COVID-19 pandemic and how an eligible disaster is treated, we are looking at these as distinct and separate from each other, and want to be able to identify them as such. So please make sure that you're reporting the 032 and not the 034. In addition, if you're reporting a forbearance, we would also want to see the 09 reported via EDR in tandem with the 032. We also, in that bulletin, announced temporary relief from certain property inspection and preservation requirements, notably as relates to insurance loss settlements, delinquent mortgages, and property preservation requirements for abandoned properties. So we do understand, of course, that the pandemic could impact your ability to produce property inspections, and therefore we are providing leniency with respect to those requirements. As relates to insurance loss settlements, we still want you to be making the disbursements. We're just loosening the requirements where you have to always complete the inspection to verify. So those funds can still be dispersed in compliance with the remaining requirements in the guide. We also had some additional topics there. We just wanted to clarify that for streamlined FlexMod offers, we are incorporating the reduced eligibility criteria that we have in place in our disaster FlexMod. So you can refer to that bulletin and the guide sections as well for what that entails. But essentially, we just eliminate a lot of the eligibility criteria to make it easier for borrowers who are current or less than 31 days delinquent to qualify for a FlexMod following a forbearance plan or otherwise as they're evaluated with their delinquency. We also wanted to point out in that bulletin that there are various outreach methods that servicers can leverage in order to meet our QRPC obligation that we provide in the guide. We had a lot of questions from servicers about whether the outreach had to be conducted via phone or or similar methods to that. And we actually have quite a few options there. It can be telephone, technology-based platforms and applications, face-to-face interviews, letters, emails, text messages, web portals. So there's a lot of different options as long as you're able to get the necessary information, which, again, we'll cover in a little bit more detail as we continue this webinar. So Bulletin 2020-4 was our initial bulletin published on March 18th. Many of the topics discussed in that bulletin were updated with today's bulletin announcement. Most of those updates were a response to the CARES Act, and again, we'll cover that in more detail later. But those updated topics would include the reporting to credit repositories, approving borrowers for forbearance plans, and suspending foreclosure sales. The additional topic we had in that bulletin was evaluating borrowers for loan modifications. And in that particular announcement, what we did was allow you to immediately begin evaluating borrowers with COVID-19 related hardships for Extend Mod, and CAP and Extend Mod are two disaster programs that are designed to get borrowers back to their regular payment amount. So for full details on that, please review the Bulletin 2020-4. In addition, on March 25th, we announced our new payment deferral solution. This was in conjunction with Fannie Mae. As designed currently, this is an option for one or two missed payments, where a borrower has one or two missed payments to get them back to current as seamlessly as possible. This does require a borrower to have made consecutive payments prior to being approved. So as it currently stands, is probably not one of the primary solutions you would be looking at for a borrower coming out of forbearance. It is something that we will continue to look at and consider possible updates to make more applicable to the COVID-19 situation and to help more borrowers in that space. Okay, if we can move on to the next slide. And one more. Great. So here we have a high-level overview of our new April 8th guide updates, and we have another slide to follow that will do a little bit more of a comparison between our initial bulletin announcement and the new bulletin. But as I mentioned, we did come out with this announcement today. It is another COVID-19 specific servicing bulletin, and in many ways it is a response and our updates to previously announced policy in response to what was included in the CARES Act that was signed into law on March 27th. So some of the topics that we do cover in this bulletin are credit reporting, foreclosure moratorium, bankruptcy motions for relief from automatic stay, forbearance plans, and quality right party contact. So if we could go to the next one. Thank you. So here we have a side-by-side comparison at a high level of how our previous bulletins, primarily the first one, 2020-4, compare to the new guidance that we issued and what those changes were. So for bankruptcy motions, this was the first bulletin to really address that specifically as relates to COVID-19. This one's a relatively simple change. We're just temporarily relieving servicers from meeting the milestones that we have in the guide in sections 9401.6 and 9401.7 as relates to the filing of a motion for relief from automatic stay. So that's relatively straightforward. We're just, relieving you of those milestones that are in the guide. For credit reporting, we initially adopted our disaster credit reporting requirement to suppress negative credit reporting if the borrower is on an active forbearance plan, repayment plan, or trial period plan. In this case, of course, it's as a result of the COVID-19 related hardship as opposed to disaster. For the new guidance, in this case, we are really just pointing to the CARES Act and FCRA, which provide much more holistic credit reporting guidance and more specific credit reporting guidance in the case of the CARES Act related to COVID-19. So we would urge you to review the CARES Act and to determine the best way to do the credit reporting in compliance with the CARES Act and also with FCRA. For forbearance plans, we had initially expanded eligibility for forbearance plans from our regular guide program so that any property type is eligible. For our regular guide program, it's just for primary residences on a delegated basis. So what we did in that bulletin is to allow for investment properties and second homes to also be delegated to servicers to offer forbearance plans. That requirement is not changing. That will continue to be a part of our forbearance offering for COVID-19 borrowers. But there were some other updates that we felt were necessary, again, in many ways, in response to what we read from the CARES Act. One of those changes was to waive the 12-month delinquency cap for COVID-19 related impacts. So in our guide, we allow forbearance for as many months in a row as is needed, although we do cap the overall forbearance so that it cannot exceed an overall mortgage delinquency of 12 months. We felt that the CARES Act was pretty clear in its opposition for that requirement, and so we are waiving that requirement. Similarly, though, we did not have a requirement that would restrict an overall forbearance plan to 12 months total, because the delinquency cap would effectively get us to where we wanted to be in that space. With no delinquency cap, we did feel compelled to develop a requirement to do that. So we are now restricting COVID-19 related forbearances to 12 total months of forbearance. We are also affirming certain requirements. And so one of those requirements we're affirming is that when the servicer is establishing the forbearance, that you should still continue to attempt to establish quality right party contact with the borrower in order to better learn their specific circumstances and help them to make the most appropriate decision. And for term length, you should continue to work with the borrower to agree on a term length up to 6 months, based, again, on that borrower's specific circumstances. That being said, we do understand that there is language in the CARES Act that could require you, the servicer, to offer a forbearance plan to a borrower where you have not fully established QRPC, and potentially the borrower could ask for a 6-month forbearance where you may believe that the forbearance term should be shorter. And in those cases, you should default to the law, which would require you to make offers to the borrower for the forbearance plan based on the specific requirements included in the CARES Act. So if you're not able to accomplish the QRPC, we do understand you must still offer forbearance in order to comply with the CARES Act in some circumstances. Okay, so I think that pretty much covers forbearance. I'm going to skip down to QRPC because I did these are related topics, and then I'll jump back up to the foreclosure moratorium requirements. But for quality right party contact, again, as relates specifically to forbearance, I'm just what I just said continues to apply just for how we're looking not only at our requirements for forbearance and your compliance to those requirements, but also our requirements for QRPC. So we do still ask that you attempt to accomplish QRPC and attempt to work with the borrower and make sure that you are doing so with all the necessary information. But if you can't do that and you're still obligated to follow the CARES Act and offer a forbearance plan, we do understand that. And, you would be considered to be in compliance with our policy in those circumstances. Additionally, for all other evaluations for loss mitigation options where we're requiring you to establish QRPC, we are going to be, we have adjusted that guidance for what you must do to accomplish QRPC. And, you can see the bulletin for the full details in what will be required for the limited QRPC that we are now offering. But essentially what we're doing is we're not requiring you to validate an occupancy status in order to fulfill this limited QRPC and evaluate borrowers for loss mitigation options. So we are loosening our QRPC-related guidance as relates to COVID-19 borrowers for loss mid evals. The foreclosure moratorium was also kind of directly impacted, originally applied to sales only. Today's announcement will show you that it now applies to all foreclosure actions. So again, please see the bulletin and read the bulletin for the full details of this announcement and some additional background and explanation. Can we move on to the next slide? So we do have Q&A, although I think what we're going to do here is start with the top questions and answers. We have a few slides with questions that have been kind of commonly coming in, and so I will go through each of these that might answer some of the questions that you have, and then we can open it up at the completion of the presentation for any additional questions you may have. So the first one, do Freddie Mac's existing disaster policies in the guide apply to COVID-19 pandemic? This one we kind of covered a little bit earlier, but no, they don't. We are looking at these as two separate and distinct types of events. We do acknowledge that some of the solutions that we have in place for COVID-19 response mirror what we have in place for disaster, and we do think that's appropriate, but we have made some updates to what we put in place, and there are certain things that have not been added to our COVID-19 response, most notably the automatic application of a 90-day forbearance plan, where in a disaster we feel that's more appropriate, where there's often property damages and borrowers are harder to get a hold of. And in this case, I mean, it's kind of the opposite of that. We're all quarantined. We're not really going anywhere. so hopefully, you are able to establish that contact. But again, what the CARES Act provides for could actually require you to not complete the QRPC and make certain offers like forbearance. But that is one difference with our approach to disaster versus COVID-19. Do I still need to send interest payments for homeowners impacted by COVID-19? Yes, we have not adjusted our requirements with respect to advances on missed payments for interest. So as is always the case, you will continue to advance interest until the loan gets inactivated at 120 days of delinquency, at which time you would not have to do that anymore. Question number 3, what's available to assist homeowners who may be facing hardships due to COVID-19? So we have, over the course of these several bulletins, put out a number of different options that are now available for borrowers, and then and also beyond just loss mitigation options, other protections for borrowers, both that we've offered ourselves and offered to, comply with applicable law. These include things like the credit reporting requirements we've talked about, the forbearance plans that we've talked about, loan modifications, the foreclosure moratorium, clarifications and leniencies offered with respect to our QRPC and outreach methods and requirements, and the bankruptcy update that we provided earlier. Next slide, please. Question 4, is there any relief for property inspections during the COVID-19 national emergency? I did cover that in a little bit more detail than the PowerPoint probably called for earlier, where we pointed to Bulletin 2020-7. We do provide relief for inspections for insurance loss settlements, delinquencies, and property pres for abandoned properties. How will a COVID-19 related hardship be verified? Again, I think we've covered that for the most part in this PowerPoint, but we really do want you to continue to try to establish QRPC and in compliance with our limited QRPC requirements. And, again, forbearance might be a little bit different in some instances. One thing that I don't think made clear enough, though, we do believe that you can meet our guide requirements for complying with QRPC and with our forbearance evaluations and the law in some instances. If the borrower is working with you, there's no reason why that borrower can't have a conversation with you and provide maybe more information than the law provides for. And that could be useful both to you and the borrower in finding that final solution. But the borrower could also just tell you that they affirm their hardship and that they want a 6-month forbearance. And, in that case, you are required to follow the law. Do servicers have to wait until a homeowner falls delinquent before requesting a modification? No, as is always the case, we do have requirements in place for early stage delinquencies and current borrowers for mods. I would say with the COVID-19 situation, you're more likely to be dealing with a borrower who probably needs a temporary solution prior to a mod, like a forbearance. Of course, there are other cases where that might not be true, and the guide continues to provide for that with our imminent default and other early stage delinquent mod requirements. Next slide, please. What's the difference between forbearance and payment deferral? So as we have branded these programs, because these terms can be used probably interchangeably in some ways, but we have a forbearance plan and we have now a payment deferral. So our forbearance plan, as we define it, is an agreement that allows the suspension or reduction of payments over an agreed upon period of time. So That's what it is. And it helps borrowers who have a temporary hardship that they expect at some point to be resolved, so that while that temporary hardship is ongoing, they're relieved of that payment obligation or some portion of that payment obligation. And once that hardship gets resolved, then you can evaluate for a more permanent solution. And a payment deferral is a permanent solution that takes, at this point, 1 or 2 missed payments, puts them into a non-interest-bearing balance at the back end of the loan, but only at such time as the borrower is done with their hardship and able to go back to making their regular payments. So they're both relief options, but one's really for an ongoing temporary hardship and the other's for a relieved temporary hardship. Okay. Number 8, if a borrower has previously had a loss mitigation solution, are they eligible for a COVID-19 related forbearance? So for our forbearance plans, and this is across the board, it's unique to COVID-19, you wouldn't be ineligible as a result of any previous hardship or previous loss mid solution that you've had. So we don't have any eligibility criteria that would say you've had too many mods, you can't have a forbearance. We don't have anything like that, or you've had too many past forbearances on previous hardships or anything like that. So, whatever this specific hardship reason is, in this case, with the COVID-19 hardship, they could get up to 12 months. Now, if they then took a 1-month break from the forbearance and tried to go back in on the same hardship and the same event, that would not meet our requirements. But as long as it was a previous hardship and a previous solution, then, no restrictions. Number 9, is a borrower with a COVID-19 related hardship ineligible for a forbearance plan because they were already delinquent? So no, the previous delinquency has no impact on the forbearance plan eligibility, especially as it relates to a COVID-19 related hardship. As I mentioned earlier, we have eliminated the 12-month total delinquency cap. So now, regardless of delinquency, if the borrower does have the COVID-19 related hardship and wants the forbearance, you are authorized to ultimately go up to a total of 12 months of forbearance term, not necessarily all at once. You can't offer a 12-month forbearance, but up to 6-month increments for a total of 12 months. Okay, next slide. Here we have our key resources. So we have a number of resources. We'll be continuing to work to develop whatever is needed in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and put out resources as necessary and updates to our policies as necessary. But here you have a list and links, so you can kind of just take a look for yourself. But we have the different bulletins and other resources available, and we can provide these links to you as well. Okay. I believe that concludes the presentation portion of this event. So I think we can move on to the servicer Q&A.
Great, thanks, Ryan. So if you do have any questions, go ahead and select the raise hand icon on the right side of your screen, and we will unmute your phone line. All right, looks like we have a question from Chuck. Hey, Chuck, your line is open.
Hey, guys. I actually just put this in the chat, too. So regarding newly originated loans, will the loans that are put on a forbearance under the CARES Act for COVID-19 affected borrowers still be purchased by Freddie? I think that's a big concern. What we've heard is that, maybe Fannie and Freddie would not purchase the loans even though they're put on it, and would they even be covered by the CARES Act? Because if they're not purchased, are they technically a government-backed loan at that point?
Hey, this is Ben Gottheim from Freddie Mac Servicing Policy as well. So a couple of things on that. One is you have here with you on this call, our team of, a number of servicing experts. That's probably a question that's, better answered by, our folks in our selling and credit department. But my understanding is this is an issue that we know of that is being discussed amongst the GSEs, along with our regulator and conservator FHFA, along with a number of the industry trade groups, because today, if a loan is already delinquent, it is not eligible for sale to us, obviously. and these borrowers that are on forbearance would be delinquent at that point. So in terms of the legal question of whether that's considered CARES Act if they're not already our loans, I don't know how to answer that. I would definitely ping your own legal counsel to do that. But yes, we do know that this is, warehousing and pipeline issues. It's just I don't think we have the right people on this call to fully delve into that question.
Sure. No, I appreciate it. I figured I'd throw it out there and see if anyone knew.
Thanks, Chuck. Looks like we have a question from Allie. Allie, your line is open.
Hi, I just had a question pertaining to, I'm referencing the effective foreclosure timeline management reference guide and kind of the items we need to do by certain days of delinquency in order to keep potential foreclosures on track. Are those items still needed if the borrower is impacted by this COVID hardship? Like I'm referencing like if we would send them a mod solicitation letter or the borrower solicitation package and things like that, if that's still needed in these instances.
So in terms of delinquency resolution and that type of outreach, yes, it would still be required. If you have an active forbearance plan, you don't necessarily have to be sending that in conjunction with certain delinquency delinquency levels. What we would require on an active forbearance is that you begin reaching out to the borrower no later than 31 days or 30 days. I apologize, it's either 31 or 30 days prior to the end of the forbearance plan and working with the borrower on options at that time. But you don't have to be, sending all the different solicitation letters during an active forbearance.
Okay, so once they're in that forbearance, it's not technically required to be sending them those packages.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great, thanks, Allie. Looks like we have a question from Amanda. Amanda, your line is open.
Hi, I had a question about the previous delinquency. So if a borrower is already delinquent, we are authorized to go ahead and put them on a forbearance plan according to what was in the presentation, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so is there a cutoff for that? I mean, I know all of our foreclosures are on hold right now, so if a borrower is, or at least was an active foreclosure, is that excluded? I'm just trying to get an idea of where that cutoff is.
Yeah, so there is no delinquency cutoff, and so that would not be excluded in the example that you provided. The only parameters around that would be that we are restricting the total length of the forbearance plan to 12 months. And so yeah, I mean, understand why you're asking the question, but in this case, we felt compelled by the law to update that requirement.
Okay, we will update those on our side then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Amanda. Next question that we have is from Heidi. Heidi. It's from Jane. Jane, your line is open.
Hi, I have a really quick question about credit reporting. So are we supposed to report to the credit bureau the AW code that the CEIA guidelines tell us to put in there, or are we just supposed to turn off the credit reporting on the account while it's in forbearance?
So we've eliminated the requirement that you turn off the credit reporting, but I would advise you to certainly take a close look at the CARES Act for their specific guidance that might even override some of the other guidance that's out there. And then otherwise, we are really kind of deferring to credit experts on how to handle credit reporting. It's something that, we were attempting to protect borrowers to the best of our ability, our limited ability, in a category and topic where it's really not our requirements and not our place. And with the stronger stance being taken by the CARES Act and other guidance that's out there, we felt this was an appropriate time to step back from doing that.
Okay, so we just follow that guideline then instead of not reporting at all.
Right, you would follow, just follow the FCRA and CARES Act guidelines.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great, thank you. Next question that we have is from Jennifer. Jennifer, your line is open. Hey, Jennifer, your line's open. All right, we'll get back to Jennifer. Next question that we have is from Joanne. Joanne, your line is open. Hey, Joanne. Oh, I think you might be muted on. Hey, Joanne. All right, let's actually move on to the next hand raised. Joseph, your line is open.
Thank you. Hello. This question is also related to credit reporting. On Exhibit 93, the model letter for forbearance offers has two different sections regarding credit reporting. One is the standard that says we will continue to report the delinquency status, and then there's the next section that if it's for an eligible disaster, you place it with the alternate version that says we will not be reporting the delinquency status. Is there a preferred which one of those two we should include in our letters?
So yeah, I mean, I think you would need to update the letter templates to comply with law and whatever it is you're reporting. I'm not going to interpret in any real detail the CARES Act for everybody. I think that would be inappropriate. But one thing I will point you to is that there is certain situations where the CARES Act does appear to allow you to report, not only allow, but require you to report borrowers as current under certain loss mitigation related programs. So again, I would definitely advise you to take a close look at that, but part of this is that the CARES Act appears to have solved for this in a lot of ways. And so in some cases, delinquent borrowers may be reported as current.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Next question that we have is from Katie. Katie, your line is open.
Yes. Once the forbearance is over, if they, do a 6-month forbearance and are back to work and able to make their payments, is there a certain time that they have to make up those 6 payments? Can it be spread out? Can it be added to the end of the loan? How do we handle those 6 months worth of missed payments?
Yes, we do have a number of options. I would say in Bulletin 2020-4 specifically, we did lay out kind of our list of options that goes through the different ways that you're required to evaluate borrowers as they come out of forbearance. So as I think I mentioned in response to another question, you should start reaching out about 30 days prior to the end of the forbearance plan, if not earlier. It's up to you, but that's the latest. And if you're able to make contact with the borrower, we have a number of options available if the borrower was current or only missed one payment prior to the national emergency declaration, where you can evaluate them without any documentation required. And there are certain solutions that are kind of special for those circumstances. So you would start with looking at our relief options, and that would include just pure reinstatement, which isn't really a relief option, but just the borrower can reinstate, then a repayment plan, and then the newly announced payment deferral as of July would be an option there. Although, as I mentioned, it's probably not going to be, or at least as it is currently constructed, is probably not an option for a borrower who's been missing payments leading to the evaluation. But then, as the bulletin explains, we have the extend modification and the cap and extend. And both of those are available for up to 12 months of delinquency, as long as the delinquency was caused by this pandemic. And by that, I mean the borrower was current or only one payment behind when the emergency was declared. And what those both do is try to get you back to your regular payment amount. And they're both intended for people who can't afford to reinstate and can't afford a repayment plan, but also don't really need payment relief. They just want to get back to what they're used to. And so in those cases, what the extend mod does is extends the term by the same number of payments that were missed. It doesn't capitalize arrearages. So it's essentially what it does is it takes your payment schedule, kind of freezes it, and just moves it forward by the same number of months. So it's really almost like, you didn't miss a payment and there was just kind of like a pause, and then you hit start again. The cap and extend does capitalize arrearages, so it increases the UPB, and then you incrementally extend the term until you get back to your regular payment amount or slightly less than that. They do, as I said, very similar things. Where the cap and extend tends to be useful, because the extend mod is probably the better solution for a lot of borrowers, but where the cap and extend tends to be useful is if you've advanced a lot for escrow or for taxes and insurance, because you can capitalize those advances into the UPB. And so then, and therefore, by extending the term, the borrower doesn't have any payment shock if there's a large amount to be paid back. But if, otherwise, with the extend mod, you have to collect the advances back directly from the borrower over time, which could, increase their monthly payment obligation overall. So those are the primary options for these types of borrowers. But then if the borrower does still need payment relief at the end, if it's a more permanent hardship, we have the flex mod, which targets 20% payment relief. And then we have short sale and deed in lieu if all else fails. And that, of course, those are liquidations and are not home retention options.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. All right. Next question that we have comes from Kevin. Kevin, your line is open.
Yeah, thanks. I'm a little bit confused about where you're saying we can go back to a loan that's delinquent and even all the way up to foreclosure or whatnot. But then I also heard that the reason for the delinquency had to be COVID related. So my question is, if they were delinquent prior, subsequent to that delinquency, they had a COVID issue, could we then go back and do a forbearance up to that 12 months? So I'm a little bit uncertain about when does this COVID question come in? If they already were 60 days delinquent non-COVID, but now have a COVID issue, could we give them a forbearance?
Short answer is probably yes. If the borrower attests to having a COVID-19 related hardship, then you can, yes.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Great. Next question that we have comes from Lisa. Lisa, your line is open.
Hi, yes, actually my question was previously asked about the hierarchy and the various repayment options. So I think you covered that with the extend and the cap extend and the various options.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. Next question that we have comes from Mary. Mary, your line is open.
Hi there. So my question is that we are starting to see several borrowers that are basically brand new loans. Either they've made their very first payment or perhaps that March or April is their very first payment. So are there any seasoning requirements that are related to the COVID-19 forbearance?
No, there are not, and nor are there seasoning requirements for the extend mod, the cap and extend mod, and if the borrower was current or less than 31 days delinquent going into the forbearance and is at least 90 days delinquent coming out, there's no seasoning requirement on the flex mod either. And then anything outside of that, you wouldn't be delegated to approve, but would submit to us for if you believed it was an appropriate solution for approval.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Welcome.
Great. Next question that we have comes from Michael. Michael, your line is open.
Hello, thank you. I have a couple of questions. I hope the first one will be I think it'll be very short. Did I hear in the beginning that on delinquency reporting we should use a 32 and not a 9? Did I hear that correctly?
Not entirely. So the 032 is going to be the reason for delinquency, basically, the default reason code. And
okay.
The 09 is the forbearance code. So if you have both, if you have a COVID-19 impacted borrower who goes on forbearance, you report both. If you just have the COVID-19 impacted borrower, but they're not on forbearance, you would just go with the 032.
I'm sorry, say that again, please. Default 32, 032 is the default reason code. What's 09?
It's forbearance.
Yes, but so go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, so the default reason code is a 32 if they enter into a forbearance, right?
Well, regardless of so if they've missed a payment and you're reporting to us the default code, the default reason code, they could be on forbearance or not. I mean, it could just be that they missed a payment, but that you knew that it was related to COVID-19. probably not going to happen as often, right? But in that case, you would report the 032. And if the borrower does go on to a forbearance, you always report the 09. So in those cases, you'd be reporting both to us so that we can identify, A, the loan's on forbearance, and B, the loan is is impacted by COVID-19.
Okay, thank you. And then I just wanted to clarify on this forbearance and deferral thing. It seems that you guys are saying that, of course, we can forbear the payments for them, but the deferral would not. It wouldn't be a forbearance and then a deferral. At the end of the forbearance, you would need to reinstate the loan, and then if you can't reinstate, we review you for some other form of assistance. What you're saying is, if you don't want that forbearance, when this is all over, we might be able to offer you a deferral. Am I getting that right?
So if you went into the forbearance, there are a number of options available coming out of the forbearance. What I was saying about the payment deferral is that we designed the payment deferral independently of this situation occurring, and its intent, the way it's designed, is for a borrower who had a temporary hardship and missed one or two payments and then started making payments again. And so you see like a 30-day delinquency, and then the borrower makes the payment, and they just keep what we call rolling as a 30. And so we were seeing that pattern in our data, and we thought it was something we would try to address, and we developed this payment deferral. So if a borrower is on a forbearance plan, they're unlikely to have made those consecutive payments that we require under the new program, and so it is unlikely to be a solution as it currently stands that relates to that situation. However, with all that being said, I think it's pretty likely that you'll see an update from us pretty soon that makes it more applicable to that situation. But right now, as it currently stands, it probably isn't.
Thank you. I understand that perfectly. And if I may, last one, I promise. I thought I heard you say that, one of the things is that we could offer them a modification. Obviously people are calling, hi, my name's John, I can't pay my mortgage, and this is a Freddie Mac. It was my understanding we couldn't offer John a modification because he doesn't have a job. Did I misunderstand that?
So, no, I don't think you really misunderstood. We do consider as a best practice that unemployment is a temporary hardship and really should be in a forbearance. So something like that generally we consider to be much better equipped for a forbearance plan. And then once that hardship is resolved and they have the job, then you really should look at them for a modification. We don't necessarily make a borrower ineligible for a mod based on unemployment, but that certainly is, like, as a best practice on your part, what you should be working with that borrower for as a forbearance plan.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Great. Thanks, Michael. Next question that we have is from Michelle. Michelle, if your line is open.
Thank you. I just want to clarify with the EDR reporting, should we be doing that immediately, or should we wait until May 1st when we do our normal delinquency reporting for those customers that we want to do the 32 and or the 9?
So yeah, go ahead and take that one, Ben. Why don't you take that?
So you can, sure. So you, first off, you still can make updates to some of your EDR that just happened last week for the March cycle. If you did place a borrower on a forbearance that started in the month of March. However, assuming that what you're referring to is the borrower has gone on to a forbearance plan starting in the month of April. April is the month that they're going to miss their first payment. You would report that to us in the first 3 business days of the month of May. Is that what you're asking?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, you don't just if you put them on a forbearance today, starting again with their April 1st payment, you don't have to then try to manipulate a mid-month EDR to us. No, you don't have to do that.
Okay, thank you. And I do have another question regarding the extend and cap mod. Are there going to be trainings or webinars to go into further detail on how to process those?
Yeah, so we do have the reference guides that are being updated and put out to help for the processing of of disaster mods. So the extend mod's in there now, but we're updating it to make it more applicable to how to process for COVID-19 specifically.
Okay, thank you.
We do have training sessions planned coming up for the next couple of weeks. They're available. We will add it to one of the links to the key resources when we send out the presentation, so you have that as well.
And before we get to the next question, I'm sorry, thank you. Before we get to the next question, I wanted to clarify something from earlier. When we were talking about the 09 and the 032 codes, they're two different code types, and so if the issue was being able to report two codes at the same time, the reason you can do that is because one is a reason code, a reason code, and one is a status code. So hopefully that clarifies a little bit better than what I said before.
Great, thanks. All right, next question that we have is from Pam. Hey, Pam, your line's open.
Hi, thank you. This was already touched on. I just want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly. So if we have a customer who is over the 60 days past due, because we called in and we were told previously by a Freddie customer care rep that if they're over 60 days past due as of March 13th, that they did not qualify. What I'm understanding, it sounds like you're saying that it doesn't matter how far past due they are going to qualify, and just want to clarify that. And then I'm not quite understanding the part about up to the 12 months. Are you saying 12 months, up to a 12-month forbearance, but that's going to include how far past due they are? So like if they're 60 days past due, those 60 days are part of the 12 months that they would qualify for the forbearance? And then also, I am just wondering if there's any incentive pay for completing a forbearance.
Sure. So to answer the first question, for a forbearance plan, the 60-day delinquency would not have made a borrower ineligible. So that's not accurate. And then, so yeah, if you had a 60-day delinquency, you could still enter into a COVID-19 forbearance plan. There's nothing that restricts that. That being said, you would not, that borrower would not be eligible coming out of the forbearance for the extend mod, the cap and extend mod, or the reduced eligibility criteria as part of the flex mod.
Wait, they wouldn't be eligible for any of the mods?
They wouldn't be eligible for the extend mod, the cap and extend mod, or being evaluated based on the disaster-specific reduced criteria for flex mod. The flex mod would still be available. It would just be a regular streamlined flex mod evaluation.
So Ryan, if I can add in to answer the one part of the question was, you asked, if the borrower is already 60 days delinquent, is that 60 days considered part of the 12 months? The answer is no. It used to be that's our normal policy, is that it's a total of 1 year of delinquency. But with the CARES Act did not limit the forbearance applicable to our loans up to a certain length of delinquency. So hence, I think we answered a question earlier, could somebody be well into foreclosure and still apply for a forbearance? And the answer is yes. Same goes here. A 60-day borrower is still eligible for up to a 12-month forbearance.
If they're in foreclosure, they're still eligible for a forbearance if they already started foreclosure?
Yes. Yeah, so under the CARES Act, all the CARES Act is limited to one 6-month period, up to 6-month period, and another up to 6-month period for a total of 12 months without limiting it to any certain length of delinquency.
Okay,
so that's
they're
what our
out
guide
for
update was today.
They're out for foreclosure. They're out for foreclosure. We give them 6-month forbearance and then another 6-month forbearance. So we put the foreclosure on hold, and they've had a 12-month forbearance. Then at that point, do we continue on with the foreclosure, or at that point would they be eligible for to look at a flex mod?
So any forbearance coming out of the forbearance, you should be reaching out to the borrower to evaluate them for all options. And if you evaluate them and they are eligible, then there would be nothing to restrict you from offering the flex mod. And in fact, if that was the first option in our hierarchy they were eligible for, you would be required in that instance to offer it.
Okay, even if they're currently out for foreclosure.
Yeah, well, I mean, technically, it should be that you're getting a hold of them during the last month of forbearance so that the foreclosure would still be suspended. But yeah, I mean, if you're not able to do that, and they're not, and you can resume the foreclosure activity after the forbearance ends.
Okay.
Yeah, and let me just clarify one thing that I said just to make sure, because yes, I know this concept of somebody being that delinquent and then getting a forbearance is pretty new to all of us. I do want to clarify one thing. If the borrower contacts you and asks or requests a forbearance and attests under the law that it is because of COVID-19, you do have to approve them for forbearance. If they don't contact you, or if they contact you and tell you their delinquency or whatever is for something else, then they would not qualify for forbearance, right?
Okay.
Because of the delinquency.
Is it okay to offer a 3-month forbearance that you can extend it if they need longer than that? Because it says up to 6 months. So can we start with the 3-month and then change it to a 6-month if they need it?
You can, as long as the borrower agrees with you and doesn't insist on a longer term. Ultimately, if the borrower wants the longer term, then they can get it up to 6 months.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate all your help.
Sure.
Great, thank you.
Okay, never mind.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, you also had asked about incentives. So there are not incentives offered for forbearance, although there are incentives offered for all of the permanent solutions that would follow a forbearance. So repayment plan, payment deferral, extend mod, cap and extend mod, flex mod, and even short sale deed in lieu are all incentive eligible.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, great. Next question that we have is from Ram. Hey, Ram, your line's open.
Yes, hi. My question is, so if a borrower is currently on a FlexMod trial payment and they've been impacted and they can't make those trial payments any longer, do we set them up on a forbearance plan, and then after they've completed that, do they go back to making those trial payments and continue with the FlexMod, or how should we move towards with that? And then the second part of that question is, if they did complete their FlexMod trial payment and we offer them a FlexMod and their first payment due post-mod and they're impacted, how should we treat those?
Sure. So under the first scenario, you can transition directly from an active FlexMod trial period plan to a forbearance plan, and that FlexMod trial period plan does not get treated as a failed trial period plan for future evaluations. And so then you would just follow kind of the regular process for transitioning out of that forbearance plan, meaning that, all of the options would be kind of available to them, including, a new FlexMod. And if you were to approve that new FlexMod, they would restart the trial period plan, but they would not be made ineligible based on the previous trial period plan having been terminated, because we wouldn't consider that failed. To answer your second question, if the borrower transitioned out of a converted a FlexMod and is now current under the newly modified loan and reaches out and says, that they've got a COVID-19 related hardship, then yes, they can go directly from there into a new forbearance plan. And being that in this scenario that you've presented, they are current going in, then they could stay on that forbearance plan as long as policy allows for and as long as they need it. And then you'd evaluate again in accordance with the regular options that we've gone over here. And if they're unable to reinstate or do a repayment plan or the payment deferral come July, then I think that they would likely be a good candidate for like an extend mod or a cap and extend mod that gets them back to their payment amount they would have had coming out of the flex mod.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it.
No problem.
All right, great. Looking at the time, it doesn't look like we have much time left, but I think we have time for one more question, and that comes from Ricky. Anyone else who we didn't get to answer your question, if you feel free to go ahead and type in your question through the Q&A feature. We'll definitely take a look at those questions and get back to you guys. So, Ricky, your line is open. Oh, hey, Ricky. All right, we'll get back. I think Ricky might have dropped off, but we'll do Randall. Randall, your line's open.
Hello, how you doing?
Hey, Randall.
So I think, hey, so I think the majority of my questions have already been answered, as we all had the same questions. But I did want to circle back to the interest payments. So from my understanding, what you guys were stating was that if a loan is placed on an interest-only forbearance plan, we are to advance the due date and apply those payments up to 120 days of delinquency?
So if the borrower misses payments, whether it's for a forbearance plan or not, and they miss the full payment, you'd advance the scheduled interest to us. If a borrower is to make a partial payment, then you would hold the partial payment in a suspense account until you get a full month's payment amount, at which time you would advance the due date of last paid installment by 1 month and put forward to us the actual principal and interest. But anytime you don't get the full payment, you only advance to us interest. So we're a little different from Fannie there. You're just advancing interest.
Okay, got it. Thank you, sir.
Sure. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. It looks like we are out of time. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and just prompt folks that you will see a brief survey question on the right side of your screen. If you can go ahead and take a few minutes to answer the survey questions, that'd be greatly appreciated. And I'll go ahead and turn the call back over to Don for closing remarks.
So in closing, I just want to thank everyone for joining us again today on our second information session call. Very engaging, excellent questions. I hope you got the answers you need. We do appreciate everything you do to help our borrowers that are impacted by this. And as a reminder, be on the lookout for additional invites for future information sessions. We typically schedule these when we have additional bulletins or information available to assist you, or if the volume of questions that we get continue to be at a high level. So once again, thank you. Have a great day, and good luck with your borrowers.